from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat, the UK's #1 veterinary podcast. But of course, we're not doing a podcast today. We're going to be mainly talking about cats. We may stray into dogs. So this is, of course, a PodCAT. Really pleased to have Emelie Fogelberg from Ceva on the line. We're going to be talking about dermatopicals. In the old time, we used to just talk about shampoos, but of course, things have really broadened and advanced over the last few years. We've got some really nice topical products that we can use as mousses or as pads, particularly looking at those difficult areas to get into. So I'm really looking forward because it is a subject that I'm quite passionate about. You know, the use of dermatopicals in all their different formats can be excellent to improve skin health in dogs and in cats. So, Emelie, first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the webinar, and perhaps just introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm Emelie. I'm one of the vet advisors at Ceva Animal Health, mainly looking after our Douxo S3 range. I'm a vet as well. I spent about 8 years in small animal practice before I ventured into the pharmaceutical industry, onto the dark side, and I've been here for just over 5 years now.
That's fantastic, Emelie. And of course, it's really great to have Ceva sponsoring this podcast with a really super range, the Douxo S3 range, which covers a lot of the conditions that we need it to cover that we see in veterinary dermatology. I think one of my problems, and it's something I've lectured on in the past, is sometimes as vets we can choose the wrong shampoo for the wrong condition, be disappointed with the results, and then, if you pardon the pun, throw the baby out with the bathwater and decide that dermatopicals are not for us. But of course, the range is now so wide, and even the different types, shampoos, mousses, and pads, and other products, even creams and things, which obviously come into dermatopicals, it gives us a really a lot of opportunity to be quite nuanced in the way that we treat some of these conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I was in practice, I found it so difficult to know which product to use when, because there are so many different ones and different ones for the same condition as well. And this is where the Douxo S3 range is quite nice, because we've tried to make it as simple for the vet, as simple for the owner, and obviously as stress-free as possible for the pet. So we have 4 different ranges, probably 3 that you would use mostly in practice.
Yeah.
So you have your Douxo S3 CALM range, which has and they're all color coded, which is quite nice as well. So I can always show you.
Well, I think, Emelie, you've got them. So those who are listening and looking can obviously see the bottles coming up. Those of you who are just purely on a PodCAT, you may miss this visual aid, but yeah, Emelie, do show us the lovely colours as well.
So here you have your Douxo S3 CALM, which has your pink top. So I quite like to think it as pink top for pink skin. So it's for your sensitive or irritated skin where you don't have any issues with bacterial overgrowth and so on. You just need something really nice and soothing for those. And you could see that you have that in your shampoo, mousse and pads, which is quite nice because it gives you a wide variety of use and tailor that to your patient and your owner as well. So that one has a high concentration of Veterinary in it, which is a natural extract from the mondo grass plant. So it's all natural. There are no additives or anything in these products either, which is what pet owners want nowadays. And Veterinary is featured throughout the Douxo S3 range, and the CALM range has the highest concentration because it is really nice and soothing. And then next, which is probably mostly used.
Just before we move on to the next one, so using something like the CALM shampoo, I often would have seen animals that were quite irritant. So the atopic dermatitis was their major problem. They were really quite red and sore. The Ovitrium has that soothing action, but I think also helps with rebalancing flora and also stops adhesion of bacteria, because
Yeah.
of course with the atopic dog, we used to say, was the bacteria causing the problems or was it the skin barrier? And often we see in atopic dogs and cats that skin barrier is quite damaged. If you look at it under an electron microscope, it looks completely disorganized.
Yeah.
And that sort of brick and cement structure has gone, hasn't it? Whereas the Vitrium helps to also improve and bring that skin barrier, back to some degree of normality as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned atopic dogs, and we know that they have a defective skin barrier to start with. So it's really important to have that extra skin support for them, which I think we sometimes forget as vets as well. We're focusing so much on reducing the itch, which is so essential because we need to make sure that the pets are comfortable. But we don't always think about treating from the outside as well, or managing the skin condition from the outside as well. So yeah, that's where the Douxo S3 range is quite nice.
And I suppose, again, because we want to concentrate on our lovely cats,
Yes.
most people will realise that trying to shampoo a cat is an interesting battle that one undertakes, as little as possible, and that's one of the beauties, I think, of the mousse is this is a product that you can use when bathing is difficult. Cats usually don't like bathing, but even certainly in dogs, if you've got a big dog, perhaps with a client who would find that difficult to lift into a bath, shampoo, if we could do, I'd probably be more in favour of. But certainly, if you can't do that, the mousse is a really good second option, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the trials that we've done, so we've got a protocol which is based on ideally do a shampoo to start with to really clean the skin.
Yeah.
And then you follow on with the mousse every 2 to 3 days for 3 weeks. And it's shown really, really great results, even compared to just shampooing. It works just as well. And especially in cats as well. So we've done studies in both dogs and cats. It's quite often that the studies are just done in dogs, and we think, oh, it'll translate nicely to cats as well. But we want to look at both because we know that cats are quite specific and particular animals, and they have their own disease processes and so on. So we've tested the mousse. So if the cat tolerated the shampoo, they got a shampoo. If they didn't, we just did the mousse, and the results were just as good with just the mousse as with shampoo and mousse. Obviously, the
Fantastic.
pads, yeah.
So obviously the calm is very much you have a dog or a cat that's got inflamed skin, perhaps there isn't any infection there, and using that on a regular basis, it sounds like every 2 to 3 days to a week for a period to really try and normalize. And I found with shampoos, you would get into a kind of flow of what you saw was necessary to keep the dog or the cat's skin in some order, and that might have been, a weekly shampoo every other week. But once you brought it under control, these are often good products to use long term because, of course, atopy is a disease that doesn't go away after a month. It's there for the dog and the cat's life. So long term treatment is necessary. And I always looked at, of course, you could just use steroids or Apoquel, but actually the more multimodal your treatment is, usually helps you to lower the amount of oral drugs that you have to use that can often have a deleterious effect in other areas, particularly if they're being used long term. And I'm, obviously thinking about steroids there, which probably aren't as popular as they were, but certainly when cost is an issue, and we all know Apoquel and Cytopoint are expensive drugs to use compared with steroids.
Yeah.
There is that option of using steroid, but the lowest dose possible, and this is where using dermatopicals can actually help you to reduce those oral doses, don't they?
Yeah, potentially. And I think you have more experience with that in practice as well. But yeah, there's definitely a potential. And obviously, using a dermatopical, like you say, as a maintenance as well, not just during a flare up, is in getting the owner to to do that regularly is quite good practice as well.
Yeah.
So you're tackling it from all sides.
Moving on, obviously, to the dog or cat, and I think this is, I remember Ian Mason saying after he'd done his PhD, the dog is a pyoderma waiting to happen. And again, as we've moved, certainly over the last 10, 20 years, and wanting to use less and less systemic antibiotics, then it's really important to have shampoos that deal with pyodermas. And of course, the next part of the Douxo S3 range is the PYO range, isn't it? Which is a chlorhexidine-based shampoo. Maybe
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just to show you as well. So again, it comes in a shampoo, mousse, and pads, but it has an orange top on it. So again, all color coded, which is easier for the pet owner. So the PYO range, it also has ophitrium in it, but obviously also the chlorhexidine to have that antiseptic effect, and it's got 3% chlorhexidine. What's quite nice about having the ophitrium is that chlorhexidine can be quite drying to the skin, as I'm sure we probably already, all of us know from scrubbing up for surgeries, it can be really sore on our skin, and it's the same for animals. So the ophitrium really counterbalance that drying effect. So you have a moisturizing effect, as well as obviously limiting that adhesion of bacteria to the skin, whilst also having the antiseptic effect of the chlorhexidine. So it's quite a nice range.
So yeah, with the chlorhexidine, it obviously is antifungal, which means that sometimes, in cases that I saw, you could have a really, really itchy dog in, but if you could get rid of the fungus, actually the itch could really diminish. And again, using this on a regular basis may be the only treatment that you need, because there may be a bit of atopy in there, but actually the major itch cause, if you like, is the fungus. And if you get rid of the fungus and can control the fungus, then the dog can be so much better. And these used to be really satisfying cases for me. Dogs with a fungal infection, treating with a chlorhexidine product would often have a really, really profound effect. And we almost felt that some of the fungus might be acting more as a sort of hypersensitivity, so almost like an allergic response to that fungus, rather than a true sort of infection, if you like.
And that's where the cytology side of things comes in as well, because I think we might suspect that there is a pyoderma or some sort of overgrowth going on, but we don't know whether it's bacterial or yeast or fungal infection. And if we just start throwing antibiotics at the animal without actually knowing if it's a yeast or bacteria, then the antibiotics are just not going to work if we have a yeast infection there. So always confirming, I suppose, with cytology is good as well.
Yeah, we're also trying more and more as dermatologists to use less and less antibiotics. So before we start on something, cytology is really interesting. I used to do cotton buds and just roll that onto the skin, particularly if it was very greasy, then put that onto a slide, stain it with Diff Quick, and the fungus and bacteria, you often really need a good 100 lens that you can go to oil immersion, and that helps you to see them so much more clearly. So a piece of advice for vets and nurses listening, a good quality microscope pays for itself very quickly in the more cytology that you will do, because an average microscope will allow you to do the parasitology stuff, but I think the microbiology is much more difficult if you don't have a nice oil immersion lens. And then obviously looking after the oil immersion lens by making sure you clean it properly will really help to keep it, at a good, give you good quality results.
Yeah,
so,
and I guess just adding to that, if people think that they might not get the most use out of the microscope, I think it's about 1 in 5 of the patients that we see in practice are dermatology cases. So a big caseload that we see in general practice is dermatology cases as well. And they're also the most frustrating sometimes. So if we can get it right the first time, it will be so much better for all parties, I think.
Definitely. And again, the PYO range is available as a shampoo, a mousse, and pads. And I think pads are so useful in these sort of conditions because thinking about the bulldog with lots of skin folds, often has folds around the bottom and around the tail. And if you look into these folds and you actually stick your finger in and then kind of sniff it, I know that sounds a bit disgusting,
Nice.
but you can get a very good idea of if there is some fungal things going on there. And in those cases, I was often recommending to clients that they'd be using these on an almost daily basis, because if you have a dog like a bulldog, this is a high maintenance dog that needs a lot more care than maybe an ordinary mongrel would have, because those skin folds can be so problematic and can cause a lot of irritation to the dogs, just because it's very sweaty and moist in those areas, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's where the pads are quite handy as well, because and people don't usually want to touch sore areas or greasy areas either. So just to put that on your finger and rub it into the skin fold is quite nice, without them having to like put a cream on or anything like that. So
And then you've got the final one, the Ceva range, which is really for those cases that you might see that look quite scaly.
yeah.
This is where this product will really come in. And you've got the Evitrium in, which is your Japanese mondo grass, but also another product that you can perhaps tell us little bit
Yeah,
about.
so it has obviously the Vitrium that you've said, and something called Ceva, which is another fun name. But it's an extract from the pomegranate peel that helps to restabilize the cornification process. So in those cases where we know they're really dandruffy and they get big flakes of skin and so on, it really helps calm that down and stabilizes that cornification process. But also in cases that are quite greasy, it kind of calms down the sebaceous glands, so you don't get that excessive sebaceous or sebum production.
Yeah.
Really.
And this is quite useful. You often see in older cats, they get quite scaly. Also, diabetes mellitus in cats, they can often be quite scaly as well.
Yeah.
And again, you've got the mousse there, which will allow you to use it instead of the shampoo, where, as we say, cats and shampooing aren't always the best bedfellows.
No, exactly. So yeah, it comes as shampoo and mousse, and again, you can see it's color coded. So that one is green,
Yeah,
which is quite nice for the owner. But yeah, I do really like the mousse for elderly cats, like you say, and we've had some really good feedback on that. Where the cats are maybe they're a bit arthritic as well, has hypothyroidism, and their skin is just not quite right. They're quite scurfy, and you just add a little bit of support for that skin, and their fur gets really nice and glossy, and reduces the dandruff as well.
brilliant. And I love the fact that the shampoos are using quite a lot of natural products, botanicals, and this always kind of makes me think about the importance of the natural world. We've got all these super products, and some of them, plants, we don't even know all the good things that they can do. I mean, who discovered that pomegranate peel could actually help to
I know, right?
to reduce scaling and so on? It's an amazing discovery.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, we've listened really closely to what pet owners want and what vets obviously want from their dermatopicals. And something that was quite important to pet owners especially was that there weren't any like additives or controversial ingredients in there.
Yeah.
So we just have natural products in the Douxo S3 range, which is quite appreciated by owners. And they obviously also wanted it to be well tolerated by their pets, but also themselves, because we're the ones to actually put it on.
Yes.
So we have trials to say that it's perfectly fine for us to put on our hands as well as putting on your pet.
Yeah, brilliant. And I suppose we should kind of finish off by mentioning Douxo 3 Care, which is it's probably your sort of bog standard shampoo and mousse that when people used to come to me quite often. And my old advice from 30 years ago was wash your dog as little as possible, because a lot of the old fashioned shampoos actually would strip a lot of oil out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were washing regularly, the likelihood is we're going to dry the dog out, you know, the skin, and the skin would be quite scaly. Whereas, of course, now the shampoos that are produced are much less likely to do that. So I know, again, the Care has the Vittrium in, which really helps to soothe the skin, but also prevent drying out as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's designed to be for regular use. If you want to use it for regular use, I'm like you. I don't recommend that someone baths their dog like every week or so, and do it as needed if they don't have any issues. But yeah, we do have obviously a shampoo, the blue top, for your general use, with the Vittrium to help just support the skin during those bath times. It's quite nice for puppies as well. I do remember being in practice and people coming in, like, is there a shampoo that you could recommend for my puppy, for example? And I wasn't aware of the Douxo range at that point, but if I was in practice now, I would probably recommend this one. It's just nice and gentle as well, and it's got a really nice smell as well.
Yeah, if you take, I live quite close to the beach. You take your dog out and he gets covered in mud, or she gets covered in mud, then that sort of shampoo just to cleanse the skin and cleanse the hair would seem a sort of sensible option.
Yeah.
And can also be used on parts if it's only the legs that get dirty.
Yeah.
You don't always have to shampoo the dog completely. It can just be in those areas. You know, particularly looking at maybe when there are infections, sometimes that can just be in very small, discrete areas. So you can also shampoo just in those armpits and groins, which often are the sort of sweaty areas that can be more prone to problems, can't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Emelie, I've really enjoyed learning more about the range. It seems to cover pretty much all that I would want it to do as a dermatopical. We could obviously talk about you know, the various other creams and things that are out there, but that's maybe for another time. So thank you for the great work that Ceva are doing in this, because I think topical treatment is so important. It can soothe the skin, it can make the skin more comfortable, but it can also help us drop the need to be using oral drugs like antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, etc. So thank you for coming on and explaining, and obviously being part of the team that's developed the product as well.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Thanks, Emelie. Thanks everyone for listening or watching. Just a reminder, I think Calm was pink, pretty in pink. Orange, PYO range.
Yeah.
Green for the Ceva.
Yeah.
And then blue for the Care. So colour coding it. Those of you who are colourblind, apologies.
Yeah, sorry.
Otherwise, look for the name as well. Thanks so much, Emelie. Thanks everyone for listening and or looking, and hopefully see you on another podcast very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.